I love that the shamanic practice, the Norris shamanic practice, which I've been studying, combines SI and NI. And I get it. I'm like, oh wow, they actually do really work together.
How did it do that?
Well, it's using some SE, this drumming, like doing drumming, but to get people into a trance state. And neuroscience wise, I understand what's happening in the brain. But that's not the only thing. We also need an intention, and we need a memory to work from. That's our most, like, depending upon what the actual activity is that we're doing. Like there's different practices. There's like lower world journey, upper world journey. There's the hero's boat journey. There's the summoning circle. There are all these different things we can do that are like different recipes in a way. One, there are recipes. Um, Two, there are the stories, like there's the Norse mythology, which is actually, for the Vikings, for example, was the stories of their heroic ancestors. When they said God, they're gods, they actually meant our heroic ancestors. Odin was a person to them who lived and died,
Hmm.
but became an important like spirit in a way. So there's that element of that. But where the real element, the SI, comes in is that usually there's an on ramp to each of these experiences, and that on ramp is the most visceral memory that's a real life memory that we can remember. And we're supposed to review that in as much detail as possible as if we're there again.
Wow.
And so it really is asking me to go back to times in my life where, what was the texture of that? What did I smell? What sounds were there? Did my feet make a crunching sound? And yeah, I could fill in with my imagination, but that's not the point. We really are encouraged to pick memories that act as the most like grounded that we can start with. Ironically, in order to take us to a space where we open a window to the unconscious. That's the same sort of trance state that Jung advocated in his active imagination technique, that's used in holotropic breath work, is used in a variety of things, in hypnosis. But it's bringing in these, or like even there's a recipe for talking to your ancestors. And it involves doing actual research. Like it will work. The more research you do about your actual ancestors, where they lived, what it was like when they lived, pictures of them, learn as much about them as you can. The more you do that, the better NI experience I will have later.
Wow. Interesting.
And it's like, okay, so I need to actually learn about my great grandmother who was a Sicilian kitchen witch, which means she was a devout Catholic, but she was also like a practitioner of some very strange things in the kitchen. And that's and you know and Catholicism allowed that it allowed witchcraft to coexist in a very innocuous way in one's kitchen, literally in the kitchen, um, at the same time as appealing to the saints and whatnot. So to actually learn about that and learn more, like fortunately my great aunt is still alive in her 90s and a great memory. Um, and I can ask her, like, where did your mother learn her craft? And she could answer those questions, but it involved me going to an ISTJ with a great memory who is recalling for me the actual literal details of lived lives, and absorbing those and learning more about my genealogy and my history and all of that, to then go on to this other journey and to have much more substance. So it's like combining earth and air together into one,
Hmm.
or fire and water, or however you metaphor you
Yes.
want. Yeah.
It's not any in any way that compromises in a way that furthers the other.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one reason why, like in this tradition, for example, INFPs do quite well, because they can have NI and SI if they develop their third and their sixth, like right there.
Hmm.
That's an option. INFPs don't necessarily develop those well,
Hmm.
where the SI might be about doing accounting. But if they really dig into what is the history of this, or the history of my family, remembering my experiences, what did people literally say, how was this done, and then being like, oh yeah, this NI thing, like, can I trust going into a trance state?
Hmm.
And what does it mean when I'm there? Like, how do I handle that?
Yeah.
I have very much learned. In fact, there was an INTJ. I believe she's INTJ uh, shaman, and she teaches a course on family lineage and the programming, the scripts, the baggage, the wisdom that we bring through our lineage. And I think that that's because of my schedule, I haven't had a chance to take her class yet. But just exploring a little bit on my own, I really came to see like, oh, right, there is baggage on each side of the family that's handed down, and there's wisdom that's handed down too. And as an intuiting type, I would like to think, especially INTJ, I'm a very independent thinker and like this and that. I'm like, I may be less programmed, or rather less influenced by the programming that I carry with me from my culture and from my ancestors, but it's still there and it still has an influence.
Hmm.
And a lot of times I realize like I'm trying to minimize what those things are, but there's a loss in trying to minimize them. And the same, like I realized, like, oh wow, there's a lot of cultural programming that I grew up with, fortunately in different countries, but still it's with me. Um, and I think is just pervasive. So like in American culture, when they poll like the parents of high school students, the number one measures are things like is my child popular? For boys, is my child a success in athletics?
Mm.
Like really, though, those are like the what is it called? Like maybe not like over 50%, but it's like a big piece. It's the biggest chunk. And I'm like, yeah, intuiting types are not immune to that. Like they get all that programming too. It just has an unconscious influence and maybe less influence, but it's still there. And yet some of that influence is also wisdom.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah.